Marcus and Natalie thought they had found peace in the quiet suburbs of Willow Creek until Linda Harper, their overbearing HOA president, transformed their backyard into the venue for a wedding they never approved, acted like she owned it, and unleashed a chain of deceit, trespassing, and shocking revelations that would shake the entire neighborhood. When Marcus and his wife Natalie moved into the Willow Creek neighborhood, they felt like they had finally found their dream home. It was a quiet suburban community, far enough from the city to escape the noise, but close enough for daily commuting. Their house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac with a wide front lawn, tall oak trees, and a backyard that stretched farther than most others on the block. It wasn't just a yard, it was practically a private park, with its thick grass, shade from mature trees, and a fence that bordered a scenic trail. It felt like their own little oasis. The couple had spent years saving for this property. Natalie, a schoolteacher, and Marcus, an IT consultant, wanted a calm place to grow old together, possibly raise a family. They were friendly, but private, the kind of people who nodded at neighbors but didn't insert themselves into block gossip or politics. So when they were invited to their first HOA meeting, they attended out of politeness, not passion. The HOA, they quickly learned, was run by a woman named Linda Harper. Linda was in her late 50s, sharp-eyed, always dressed in expensive pastels, and carried herself with the air of someone used to being obeyed. Her presence dominated the meeting, and her voice never hesitated or faltered. She listed rules, updates, and reminders with military precision. Street parking, holiday decorations, garbage bins, every detail had a regulation. Marcus found it overbearing, but Natalie chalked it up to the price of living in a well-kept neighborhood. What struck Marcus most was how everyone deferred to Linda. Other board members barely spoke. It was as if Linda wasn't just leading the HOA, she was the HOA, and from that night on, he noticed her presence everywhere. Walking her dog 3 times a day, waving to each car that passed, pausing in front of houses with a judgmental squint. One afternoon, Marcus caught her snapping photos of his recycling bins because they had been put out 10 minutes too early. He let it go, but he made a mental note. Linda liked control, and she watched everything. Weeks turned into months, and Marcus and Natalie settled into a routine. They loved sitting in their backyard on Sunday mornings with coffee, listening to birds and the wind in the trees. It was their sanctuary. But little things began to disturb that peace. The first was a single folding chair near the back fence. Marcus assumed it had blown in from a neighbor's yard or had been left by a landscaper. He folded it up and placed it by the trash. A few days later, 2 more chairs appeared along with a white rope tied between 2 trees, as if someone was outlining space for an event. Natalie was confused. Had they approved something they forgot about? A neighborhood gathering maybe? But they hadn't received any notices. They emailed the HOA. No reply. Marcus removed the chairs again, thinking it was some weird miscommunication. Then, the deliveries started. A truck pulled into the cul-de-sac on a Wednesday afternoon and unloaded boxes, labeled event decor and lighting. The driver asked for Linda, then proceeded to leave everything on their driveway when no one answered. That night, Marcus heard voices in the yard. He peeked through the window and saw 2 people stringing lights between trees without permission, and clearly not contractors they hired. It was unsettling. Who felt they had the right to walk into someone else's yard and start setting up as if it were public space? Marcus walked outside, but by the time he reached the backyard, the workers were gone. Only the lights remained, and the arch they'd started to assemble was now half built in front of the biggest oak tree. Natalie suggested putting up a sign, "Private property, no trespassing." They did. But the very next day, the sign was removed. In its place was a laminated flyer pinned to a tree that read, "Reserved for event Saturday, 3 p.m. They didn't know it yet, but something larger was unfolding. Marcus reviewed their property deed and confirmed the yard was 100% private, no easement, no shared access. Still, the deliveries continued. More tables, a speaker system, portable heaters. Something was being planned, and it was clear that whoever was behind it either didn't know or didn't care that the space didn't belong to them. Suspicion turned into frustration, and frustration into quiet anger. This wasn't just a mistake. Someone was deliberately preparing for an event on land that wasn't theirs, and all signs pointed to one person behind it, Linda Harper. Marcus's frustration deepened as each day brought something new and unwanted to his backyard. It was no longer just odd deliveries or misplaced furniture. There was now a sense of creeping violation, like his home was slowly being taken over one unnoticed inch at a time. The calm he once felt in his sanctuary was being replaced by unease. and there were too many unanswered questions. Who was organizing this? Why his yard? And how did anyone believe this was acceptable? One morning, while sipping his coffee by the kitchen window, Marcus noticed a man with a measuring tape walking along his fence line. The man didn't knock or say anything, just measured, scribbled notes, and took photos. Marcus stepped outside to confront him, but by the time he rounded the house, the man had already left in a white van with no company name. There had been no prior notice, no permission asked. Just like before, things were happening in silence. Behind their backs, it became a daily guessing game. Some days it was deliveries rolls of white linen, boxes of flatware, or crates marked with fragile stickers. Other times, it was workers, walking freely through the gate, adjusting lighting or setting up cables. Each time Marcus intervened, they gave vague excuses or claimed they were just following instructions. But when pressed on whose instructions, they clammed up and left. The final straw came when a portable toilet was delivered and dropped in the far corner of the yard, hidden behind a tall hedge. It was as if the space had been unofficially leased, without consent. Even their landscaper, who came every 2 weeks, was baffled by what he saw. He asked Marcus if they were throwing a party or filming a commercial, but Marcus had no answers. All he had were questions and a growing sense that something much bigger was being orchestrated without him. Natalie, ever the calm one, suggested they reach out again to the HOA. They sent another email and called twice, both times getting no response. When they stopped by the HOA office, it was closed with a handwritten note that read, "Out for the week, contact HOA president directly." The number listed below led straight to Linda Harper's voicemail. Feeling stonewalled, Marcus took matters into his own hands. He installed motion-detecting cameras around the backyard and near the side gate. Within 24 hours, the footage told them everything they needed to know. In the dead of night, a woman in a pale pink jogging suit, Linda Harper, in the backyard. Using a key, she unlocked the side gate, strolled in confidently, and directed to workers as they carried in folding chairs and stacked them by the hedges. She moved around with authority, clipboard in hand, pointing out where tables should go, checking the alignment of lights, and even rearranging flower pots. There was no doubt left. Linda had made herself at home in their space. She was organizing something elaborate and treating their yard like it was an extension of her own property. Marcus couldn't believe it. He rewatched the footage over and over, stunned by the audacity. Linda hadn't just assumed control, she had prepared, planned, and executed a slow, calculated takeover. No notes, no permission, no discussion. She was using her position in the HOA as a weapon, and she expected no one to challenge her. Natalie searched online and discovered that Linda had a reputation. Posts on neighborhood forums mentioned her staging events in common areas, pushing property boundaries, and brushing off complaints. But never before had she gone this far. The next few days were filled with tension. Every time Marcus opened a window, he could hear hammering rehearsals of some kind of performance, and the buzz of generators. His yard was now a construction zone. He tried calling the city to report unauthorized use of private land, but without immediate proof of trespassing in real time, they offered little help. Saturday was approaching, and with it, a growing sense of dread. Marcus and Natalie had no idea what was about to happen in their backyard, but the signs were becoming impossible to ignore. An event was being planned, something big, and it was happening whether they agreed to it or not. Then came the most shocking moment yet. On Thursday evening, a large white banner was hung at the end of their driveway. It read, "Welcome to the Harper Caldwell Wedding Celebration Private Event." Below that was a printed note, "Entrance through side gate, please respect the property." Their names weren't mentioned anywhere. Marcus stood frozen on his porch, staring at the sign. It was now clear Linda wasn't just using their yard. She was hosting a full-scale wedding, and she was doing it like she owned the place. Saturday morning arrived with an eerie stillness. Marcus and Natalie barely slept the night before, the weight of uncertainty pressing heavily on them. By dawn, there was already movement outside. Cars began arriving one by one, elegant and polished, their tires crunching against the suburban asphalt. Drivers in tuxedos opened doors for passengers in flowing gowns and tailored suits. Guests walked past Marcus's home like they had been there 100 times before, like they belonged. A catering truck parked across Marcus's driveway, blocking it entirely. Workers in all-black uniforms unloaded trays of hors d'oeuvres, drink dispensers, and coolers packed with champagne bottles. A team of decorators arrived next, carrying bouquets of fresh flowers, silver lanterns, and ornate table centerpieces. They moved with purpose and precision, clearly instructed ahead of time, but Marcus and Natalie had never spoken to a single one of them. The once quiet backyard had transformed into a grand wedding venue overnight. White folding chairs were arranged in neat rows facing the massive oak tree, now draped in silken flowers. A wooden arch stood tall at the center, decorated with roses, peonies, and ivy. A dance floor had been constructed from smooth wood panels, surrounded by light posts wrapped in garlands. Speakers were mounted on stands, and a DJ tested sound levels with upbeat tracks that echoed through the neighborhood. By mid-morning, more guests poured in. Laughter, clinking glasses, and the occasional popping of champagne corks filled the air. Marcus stared out the window, watching complete strangers sip cocktails on his lawn, take selfies under his trees, and pose with the floral arch like it was theirs. A professional photographer directed people into groups, even standing in Marcus's flower bed to get a better angle. Natalie tried to stay calm, but her hands trembled. It was surreal. Every inch of the yard was occupied. Their garden gnome was now standing next to the cake table. Their hammock had been taken down and replaced with a decorative swing. A printed schedule posted near the entrance listed every part of the day: ceremony at 2 p.m., cocktail hour at 3, dinner at 5, first dance at 6:30, fireworks at 9. Yes-fireworks. The guests, oblivious or unconcerned about whose yard they were celebrating in, mingled freely. Some even wandered up onto Marcus and Natalie's deck, placing drinks on their patio furniture, snapping pictures with the scenic view behind them. There were no signs of hesitation, no second glances at the house, no questioning looks. They acted like it all belonged to them. And then Linda arrived. She stepped out of a sleek black sedan wearing a long lavender dress and a wide-brimmed hat. Her demeanor was calm, composed, proud. She greeted guests like a host at a charity gala, directing traffic, adjusting centerpieces, and speaking confidently into a wall. It was clear she had planned everything, and she believed she had done nothing wrong. Marcus couldn't take it anymore. He walked out the front door and across the yard, weaving through the guests, heading toward Linda, but before he reached her, he noticed something even more shocking. The bride and groom had arrived. A beautiful young couple stepped into the yard, the bride's veil floating gently in the breeze, the groom adjusting his cufflinks. Guests cheered. The DJ played a soft instrumental song. The bride held up her bouquet and smiled at the crowd. A photographer snapped away as the couple posed in front of Marcus's favorite tree, the one he'd planted 10 years ago, the one he trimmed every season. They had no idea whose yard they were standing in. Or worst, they knew and didn't care. Marcus tried calling the police again. This time he was determined to get results. When the officers arrived, they stepped into the chaos, unsure how to handle it. Linda quickly intercepted them, presenting papers she claimed proved the space was part of a shared green zone. She spoke with conviction, waving outdated maps and referencing obscure HOA clauses. The officers seemed unsure. It wasn't a violent crime. It wasn't a break-in to them. It looked like a party with a paperwork dispute. Marcus argued his side. He showed the deed. He played security footage. But the officers couldn't shut down a wedding in full swing without a court order or immediate legal confirmation. They left, advising Marcus to file a civil suit if he wanted to pursue the matter further. The ceremony continued. The bride walked down the aisle to gentle piano music. Guests wiped away tears. Champagne glasses clinked. Marcus stood frozen at the edge of his own yard, watching a stranger say "I do" under the arch built without his permission, in the space he once called his own. The invasion was complete. The wedding was happening, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The wedding ended with cheers and fireworks, just as the schedule had promised. Marcus and Natalie watched from inside their home, blinds drawn, each burst of color in the sky triggering another wave of disbelief. Their backyard, once a peaceful retreat, had been hijacked, used as a playground for strangers, and now it was left littered with champagne flutes, plastic utensils, and wilted flower petals. But even more unsettling than the mess was the silence that followed. No apologies, no explanations, just a community pretending nothing had happened. By Sunday morning, most of the decorations were gone. A cleaning crew arrived early and quietly packed up the remaining tables, chairs, and equipment. The swing was taken down, the arch dismantled, and the dance floor panels stacked into a truck. Within hours, the yard looked almost normal again. But to Marcus, it felt hollow, like the scene of a crime where evidence had been scrubbed clean. That same day, he began gathering documents. He went to the county records office, located the plat map, and requested a certified copy. It clearly showed the entire backyard was within his property, lines no easement, no shared zone, no ambiguity. The lawn, the trees, the flower bed, all belonged to him and Natalie, every square foot. He had proof, but the more he looked, the more he realized this wasn't an isolated incident. Online, Marcus found threads in local forums discussing Linda's past behavior. Some neighbors complained of her borrowing private spaces for HOA photo shoots. Others mentioned backyard parties that mysteriously moved from one home to another. No one ever pressed charges. Most just wanted to move on. Some were afraid of retaliation. Linda had a reputation, and it was built on control and intimidation. Natalie encouraged Marcus to go further. He contacted several vendors who had worked the weddings, the caterers, the florist, even the DJ. At first they were hesitant, but when Marcus explained that he owned the property and had never given permission for the event, a few began to talk. One florist admitted she had been paid in cash, told to set up at the community's private event space. Another vendor forwarded emails from someone using an account linked to the HOA office, signing messages with only L. Harper. Marcus compiled everything: photographs, invoices, emails, security footage, property deeds, and eyewitness accounts. He created a massive folder, digital and physical. Every detail was documented, but he didn't stop there. He called a local investigative news station and pitched the story. They were intrigued. A suburban wedding, secretly hosted on someone else's private land, orchestrated by an HOA president without consent, had the makings of a viral expose. Within days, a small news crew visited Marcus's home, filmed interviews, and took shots of the yard. They requested permission to use the camera footage and vendor statements. Marcus handed it all over. The segment aired the following week, titled "The Backyard Wedding Scandal." It aired during the evening news and quickly gained traction online. Comments poured in. Viewers were stunned by the footage of strangers partying on someone's lawn. The interviews with vendors added weight to the story, and Linda's confident appearance in the background of the security footage sealed public opinion. She didn't look like someone who made a mistake. She looked like someone who knew exactly what she was doing. The fallout came fast. Within 48 hours, the HOA board called an emergency meeting. Unlike previous gatherings, this one wasn't in Linda's living room. It was held at the community center, and for once, she wasn't in charge. Board members who had long remained silent now had no choice but to act. Neighbors who once nodded politely at Linda now voiced concerns, some angrily, some tearfully. They admitted they had suspected things, but never thought she would go this far. Linda was removed as HOA president in a unanimous vote. Her access to the HOA office and resources was revoked immediately, and soon after, the HOA itself launched a formal investigation into her tenure, questioning past events, financial decisions, and how many other homeowners had unknowingly been taken advantage of. But that wasn't all. Marcus filed a civil lawsuit seeking damages for property trespass, emotional distress, and unlawful use of private space for commercial purposes. He added vendor testimonies, the news coverage, and his recorded documentation. His case was strong, stronger than Linda ever anticipated. The final blow came from the IRS. The news story had caught the attention of a local auditor, and within weeks, a preliminary inquiry into Linda's financial dealings was underway. It wasn't just about the wedding anymore. There were signs of unreported income, potential tax evasion, and misuse of HOA funds. Linda went silent. Her once frequent neighborhood walks stopped. Her pastel outfits were no longer seen on the sidewalks. Curtains remained drawn in her house, and her once proud garden slowly withered without her constant pruning. The woman who once ruled Willow Creek with an iron smile had finally vanished from sight. Weeks passed, and the memory of the unauthorized wedding slowly began to fade from neighborhood chatter, but the consequences rippled in ways no one could ignore. Linda Harper's presence, once so constant it felt inescapable, was now entirely absent. Her pale pink car no longer patrolled the cul-de-sac. Her house, once meticulously maintained, began to show signs of neglect: fading paint on the shutters, overgrown hedges, and an overflowing mailbox that hadn't been touched in days. For someone who had made a career out of monitoring other people's properties, the irony was hard to miss. Marcus kept to himself during those weeks, choosing to stay focused on the legal process. He met regularly with his attorney, reviewing updates to the lawsuit. The evidence he had collected, especially the footage of Linda directing workers under cover of darkness, was rock solid. More witnesses came forward as word spread, including 2 former HOA board members who admitted they had been pressured into silence during Linda's term. One revealed that Linda had previously proposed using another resident's driveway for a graduation party without consent, but was stopped before it escalated. The lawsuit gained local attention. News outlets followed up with Linda's story, and a segment on regional television painted her as the symbol of HOA abuse of power. Messages of support flooded Marcus's inbox from strangest people who had suffered under overzealous HOA leaders but never had the courage to push back. Some even called him a hero. Though Marcus didn't feel heroic, he still felt violated. His home had been turned into a stage. His private retreat had become public spectacle. The court case wasn't just about accountability, it was about restoring a sense of ownership over what had been taken from him. One morning, Marcus opened his front door and found an envelope taped to it. No postage, no return address, just his name written in tidy cursive. Inside was a single sheet of paper, unsigned. It said, "I thought it would be simple. I didn't expect this. I'm sorry for the trouble." That was it. No apology for the invasion, no offer to make things right, no admission of guilt, just a short note, left behind like a whisper from a woman who had once commanded everything. A few days later, Linda's house went up for sale. A real estate agent placed a sign quietly and held private showings only. Rumors spread quickly. She was leaving town. Some neighbors claimed she'd moved in with a cousin across the state. Others said she was fleeing potential charges tied to the IRS audit. No one knew for sure, but by the end of the month, a moving truck appeared, and one by one, her belongings disappeared into cardboard boxes and silent departures. Marcus watched from the window as Linda stood in her doorway one last time, glancing back at the street she once ruled. No one came to say goodbye. No waves, no handshakes. She climbed into a car and drove off without a sound. Just like that, the woman who had turned his life upside down was gone. After her departure, the HOA underwent a quiet transformation. New leadership took over, and with it came a shift in tone. Meetings became more transparent. Rules were reviewed and revised. Property boundaries were formally confirmed, and homeowners were given resources to prevent anything like what happened to Marcus from repeating. For the first time, the HOA felt like a cooperative, not a command center. Marcus and Natalie took their time restoring the backyard. They planted new flowers where the arch had once stood and replaced the grass damaged by foot traffic. A new fence went up taller, sturdier, and with a reinforced gate that could only be opened from the inside. They installed permanent signage marking their property line, not out of paranoia, but as a clear statement, "This space is ours." Peace returned slowly. The sound of birds replaced the echo of speakers. The scent of fresh soil and blooming roses filled the air again, and for the first time in weeks, Marcus sat on his patio with a cup of coffee and didn't feel like he was being watched or invaded. Yet sometimes, the memories would return. The vision of strangers dancing across his lawn, the sound of vows spoken under his oak tree, the image of Linda waving to guests as if she were queen of the block. But those moments, once sharp and painful, began to blur over time, dulled by the return of calm and the quiet satisfaction of justice. In the end, the wedding had come and gone, but the truth remained. Linda had acted like she owned his property, until she was reminded legally and undeniably that she never did.